Hello, welcome to Ready for Mistakes. I'm Jeff Smoody, a photography-based artist from Illinois. This is a photography podcast where I talk to artists about their work and their ideas. Thank you for listening, and I really hope you enjoy this conversation. Hello, good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Welcome to Ready for Mistakes. If you are a first-time listener, long-time caller, this is my photography podcast, talking with artists about their work, as you just heard in that intro. I'm sitting here on Halloween weekend. Halloween is a Tuesday this year, which is always unfortunate, but you only get a few years where you do get a weekend of Halloween. Alas, I was, in fact, at a Halloween party, very low-key. For those of you that have seen the show The Bear, I, in fact, went as Carmen from The Bear. If you guys haven't seen that show, highly recommend it. It's very intense. It's got funny moments. It's got dramatic moments. It's got some really wholesome moments. It's incredible. Also, I love Chicago more than most things. So, of course, I'm going to be a little bit biased in favor of a show that's literally about a restaurant in Chicago. I hope you guys got a good chance to listen to the last episode with Nathan Pierce. Since that has come out, the copies of his new book, High and Lonesome, have started to ship out from Deadbeat Club. I got my copy this past Friday. It's really quite beautiful. It's one of those kinds of books that leaves you wanting more. And that's something that I always hope will happen with a photo book. I'd rather want more than feel overwhelmed. And that's a whole conversation about photo books and design and sequencing, but he really hit the nail on the head with this one. It's a fantastic book, beautifully made, really nice to handle. The book cloth is very soft. It's really, really nice. Deadbeat Club does some really fantastic work over there, so it's hard for them to make a bad book, you know? So check out that podcast I had with Nathan. He's a great guy, and hopefully I'll be able to meet up with him soon, sometime when I go to Illinois, where perhaps a little check-in kind of thing, talking about things that have been going on lately. That'd be something I would love to do with this show, especially when I'm out traveling around, or if an artist that I talk to is going to be in the area that I'm at, finding a time to talk to them briefly over a coffee about their artwork. It was something that would be quite fun to add into the show. Moving on to this week's episode, I got the chance to talk to an artist who is actually my first international artist. He's an artist from Canada. Levi Hemphill is really a fantastic work. He does this really great post-documentary style work, focusing on kind of like a journalistic approach, but understanding that it's a personal, poetic approach to these subjects that he's working in. So he's making work in his region of Canada. We talk a little bit about that, how it's surprisingly hard to find photographers working in a post-documentary style, working in artistic parts of photography that are working specifically in Canada, let alone their own region of Canada. So Levi is one of those artists. He's making some great work. As usual, I hope you guys go check out his work on his website and Instagram and all that. Either while you're listening or before or after listening, just at some point, get familiar with the actual pictures. It's the one downside about doing a podcast, an audio-only podcast about photography. I'm more interested in the ideas, just as much as I am interested in the pictures themselves. I'll read off a really quick bio about Levi so you guys get a little bit of a baseline for him. Levi Hemphill is a documentary photographer from the Rainy River District of Ontario and is currently based in Atlantic Canada around New Brunswick. His work focuses on the constructs and relationships of social and physical environments. He's had work from Friday Night's Monday Blues, featured in Sola Journal issue number 1, The Land from Which We Come, and Where Do We Go From Here, Analog Forever magazine, which was an online group show. So his work is really fantastic. We talk a bit about some of his projects. That Friday Night's Monday Blues one is one that we primarily focus on, but we're also talking about some of the work that he's kind of been toying around with different titles for and trying to figure out what to do with that, some of his more recent black and white work, as well as some work that he's had on the back burner for a little while with an interesting connection to, not a direct connection, but more of a, I guess you could say, period-based location competition between where I'm at and where he's from, which is kind of fun, which you guys will hear a little bit about that later in the episode. So 2 more artists to talk to for the rest of the year after Levi. And then we'll be off to the races for 2024. Anyway, that's a lot. I hope you guys enjoy this episode and this conversation that I had with Levi Hemphill. So without anything else, here's that conversation. Hey Levi, how's it going? Glad I can have you on the show.
It's going good. Appreciate the invite. It's nice to be here. Nice to talk about photography once in a while.
Absolutely, yeah. Well, I was really glad to come across your work not terribly long ago and really dove into it, and I was quite interested, of course, otherwise I wouldn't have asked you to come on. So I'm really curious about kind of how you got started in photography and art and all of that. In your own words, kind of describe what your origin story is.
Well, thanks for the kind words, first of all. I guess it's pretty simple. I just kind of got started in high school, like a lot of people. Dug the 35 mil camera out of my parents' closet and fed some rolls through it. Just kind of an excuse to get out of the house, and it turned into a passion, I guess, over time. And it's almost like a therapeutic process, I guess. Allows you to just kind of be somewhere. You didn't really need more of a reason than photography. So I don't know. It's kind of that stuck with me over the years, where it's just like I have to do it. There's a compulsion. You just get out of the house and process the world that way.
Yeah, that's a really good kind of sentiment that I share a lot of. I see a lot of my photographer friends have a similar kind of thing where it honestly started for some of my friends the exact same way. You know, their parents had a camera, digital or film, and this kind of like took it and went off with it. And the parents are just like, yeah, do what you want. Did your high school ever have like any photo classes or anything?
Yeah, actually, there's a full black and white darkroom. For some reason, I never took any classes in high school. I knew the art teacher pretty well. I was interclass all through high school, but I don't know. I just didn't get into it there. It was just, I guess, just for me.
You know, that's not bad.
It wasn't really.
I'm glad
big.
your high school had it though.
It was cool that it was there, but it wasn't really. There weren't a lot of kids that were into it that I know of, that I can recall. Anyway, it was a long time ago, but.
My high school, a lot of kids thought of taking the photography class as like a blow-off kind of thing, of course.
Yeah.
But I was, me and a couple of friends in high school were like the ones that like really were like got really into it. Some of them went into like digital media in college and all that. But obviously I went off and got 2 freaking degrees in it. So
yeah,
as it happens. So where about in Atlantic Canada are you at?
I live in a town called Riverview. It's just outside of Moncton, which is the largest city in New Brunswick.
Oh, nice, yeah.
Just kind of, it's hard to give reference because I feel like it's just the middle of nowhere. But it's a couple hours from Halifax, 6 hours north of Boston.
Yeah, that's, I was just talking to my dad yesterday about the fact that the U.S. education system, as flawed as it is, the older I've gotten, the more I've realized that another huge flaw is that we spend all this time memorizing the 50 states. We spend very little, if not zero time on, getting familiar with the 2 countries that border the U.S. I had to wait until my late 20s to really realize, get familiar with Canada, and still haven't even gotten familiar with Mexico. It's like, there's a lot going on up there geography-wise, and I just have no clue until, a year ago, oh yeah, there's, a whole separate time zone east of Maine.
There's 2, actually. There's Newfoundland is 30 minutes ahead of us.
Oh my, 30 minutes? Jeez.
Yeah, it's weird. So it's 11:45 in Newfoundland. It's either ahead or behind. I can't remember, but yeah, it's weird.
Yeah. Like you said, your area of New Brunswick is kind of middle of nowhere kind of vibe, and I think that's probably one of the reasons that really drew me to your work, Because a lot of the area that you have been photographing in reminds me of the landscape that I was surrounded by when I was a journalist in central Illinois. I'm really curious about when you're out shooting in your pocket of the North, what are you really kind of looking for out when you're out and about?
This is a good question. I don't necessarily think that I'm looking for something. Sometimes I'll I don't know. I've tried making a list of random arbitrary things to look for, to kind of, I guess, have some sort of lane to be in, but I never end up stopping for those things for some reason. Like, I'll see something on the list, and there will always be some reason why it's just not, an opportune time, or it won't work. So I don't know. I just kind of wander around for the most part. It varies from project to project too. Like, for what I'm working on right now, it's almost completely aimless. And more in the sense of like how I first started with photography as just a reason to exist, or not. I don't know. It's a little bit heavy, but just get out. So yeah, I don't really necessarily look for things, but I will come back to areas a lot. Like, I like to, rather than just do a loop through in like one pass, I'll go back as many times as I can until I get bored of it, really, and I just stop seeing things.
Have you ever actually gotten bored of a certain location that you've gone back to repeatedly?
Oh yeah, all the time. And that's kind of like, that's the indication where it's time to go explore somewhere else. And I often find that if I'm away from that place for long enough, that it'll become interesting again. Like, it'll change subtly. Like, the trees will grow in, or somebody will build a house, or whatever it is. Everything changes, and that's something that like the history of a place, not any particular place, but what has happened in that area in the past, like over whatever amount of time, I find it super interesting. Like, if you find an old foundation in the woods, for example, stuff like that, I think is super exciting. At least right now.
I've seen some of that out here in New England. There's actually the, like, capital THE, the most haunted forest is like a 20-minute drive away from me. The most haunted forest in North America, that is. And then there's another place that I went to over in Western Rhode Island, which is that both of those places I came across some kind of stone foundation. One looked like probably from like the 50s or later, and the other looked like it was colonial. It was like all like proper stones. And there's like no information about these things nearby or anything like that. So I'm really like curious about that kind of thing too.
Yeah, it's really interesting to learn about that period. There's a really great book that I'm kind of wading through right now called North of America. It's by Jeffers Lennox, and it kind of goes through the finer details of how Canada was formed. So there's a strong presence of New England and America as well, because they kind of came together at the same time. But it's really interesting, just the finer details, the political things. Good book. There's a lot of history in this area that's it's kind of underrated, I think.
I think that that leads me to a good question that I had next. That was kind of about like my personal lack of knowledge on not only Canada and its history, but also specifically like Canadian photographers and artists, because I know of some Canadian artists, but they typically don't make their artwork in or about Canada. They do it elsewhere. Like, the obvious example for me is Kyle McDougall, who did his first book about the Southwest of the United States. Yeah. So it's like the Canadian artists that I know aren't making work about Canada, and so coming across your work really kind of acted almost like a gateway for me into that. So I'm really curious about your perception on Canadian photography, and if you believe that your region of Canada, the Atlantic Canada area, has any kind of particular visual accent of sort. Like we all have like different vocabularies that build based on our local regions. And I'm curious if you've seen in other artists' work from the same general area, if there is a kind of accent of sort, visual accent that's present in a lot of the artwork made.
I love that question. I want there to be, but I don't feel like there is. Like your point about a lot of Canadian photographers working in other places, I find the same thing. Like there are some really great photographers here, but for the most part, they work in other places or do projects about other things. The accent, the photographic accent here, I guess it would be kind of like travel photos. That's kind of what this region is known for, I guess. Like visually, is just picturesque views, and it is quite beautiful, especially in the fall. Like you get the turning colors, but I don't know. It's not like what you would see in like this, the southern states. There's like a distinctive style of photography there, or in the Midwest there is. I don't really find that with Canada. There's not like an Eastern or a Central or a Western. I'd like to be proven wrong on that, because that's a really good, not necessarily proven wrong, but it's a good thing to talk about.
Yeah, like that's something that I've been spending a bit more time on, and kind of realizing that for like, even though I'm not living in the Midwest, I'm from Illinois, so like I've been trying to get myself in gear to start looking for more photographers that make work in the Midwest, and ideally the central Midwest, and even just artists that are making work in rural locations, even if it's like Texas or Colorado, into the eastern side of Colorado and Wyoming, Montana. Just because it's such a different landscape that, like I've talked about in previous conversations on the show about how the East Coast and the West Coast have certain kinds of spirits to their work that is just distinctly different from any kind of rural photography, based on, whether it's rural America or rural Canada or rural anywhere. There's always a certain kind of difference in things. There's always some like through lines. You get like rural Manitoba versus rural Minnesota, like you're going to get some similarities, even though they're very different cultures. And I think that's really fascinating. It's definitely not easy to find artists in these like lower population kind of places. And I think that's one of the things that makes me personally want to like really strive to find more artists that make work like that.
Yeah, it's a really interesting, I don't know, question. Now it's got me thinking. I'm just trying to name 5 photographers from Canada, and it's drawing blanks.
And they're all going to be artists that make stuff elsewhere.
Yeah.
But that's not a bad thing. I feel like if anything, that kind of goes to show that the kind of work that you're doing in your local area has a certain kind of weight to it that I think makes it that much more interesting. Because like I look at your work, Friday Nights, Monday Blues, and I mean it has that feeling for me that feels like rural Midwest, even though it's almost 20 hours east. So it's like it's completely different for that, but it has a similar kind of spirit. And since that work it's entirely color, and it's like super poetic and has that kind of combination of portraits and the landscapes and all that. It's like a portrait of the river that you were focusing on. So I'm really interested in how you might perceive it now, that if you kind of feel like it is kind of something that could be perceived as anywhere in North America, or if from your perspective, if it's something that feels very specific to you.
Yeah, I would agree 100% on that. That was actually something that was kind of in the back of my mind the whole time I was working on that project was to kind of make it look like it could be anywhere. Just, I don't know, to make it more accessible in a way to a broader audience, if that makes any sense.
Yeah.
It's also not entirely me. Like those scenes where obviously they're here, so like it could be anywhere in North America. From my own experience, just traveling through the country, it's pretty visually similar to anywhere you go.
Yeah, like I'm looking through the gallery on your website, and like there's specific scenes that look like they could be, like for me, they could be Wisconsin, some that could be Texas, others that could be New England and such. It's like, it's really fascinating to me that this is a relatively specific area, but it looks like it could be like pinpointed on any spot on the North American map.
Yeah, that's really like one of the main reasons that I really like making work here is because you can kind of do that, but it's when you move around the province and even just in this specific county that I'm in, you can drive for 20 minutes and it feels like you're in a chunk of Wyoming, and then you drive like an hour in the other direction and you're in like the Great Plains almost. And then like if you go further to where I went to high school, you get the northern part of the Appalachians, so you get the like hillier, I don't know, you get a really wide variety, and then of course there's the ocean like right there as well, so you get this really varied landscape, really varied people, almost like microcosms of people. And yeah, it's just the variance keeps it interesting. There's always something new.
It's kind of the same reason why I love photographing in the Midwest, and even out here. If I drive like 3 hours west, I'm in like the closest part of the Appalachians, in the Berkshires. If I go a little bit further, then I'm getting to some of the bigger mountains, like west of Albany, New York. So since I'm very unfamiliar with your area and the specific area for this project, tell me a little bit about this river and kind of like about what the place is, broad stroke speaking.
So the project started and finished with it wasn't necessarily deliberate, but I started around the same time that a new bridge was being built to replace this causeway that was put in the 60s, and it caused a whole slew of environmental issues. Like there's massive populations of fish like salmon and shad, that were wiped out because of this causeway. The course of the river changed a lot. There's a whole bunch of sediment. Anyway, they took out the causeway, they put this bridge in, and it took 3-4 years to complete it. So I made pictures within that kind of time frame. The river itself is recovering a lot quicker than anticipated, which is awesome. It is 80 kilometers long. It empties into the Bay of Fundy. It's a tidal river, which is really cool. There's every time the tide comes in, there's a tidal bore that is basically like a huge wave that comes in from the ocean. And it used to be several feet tall before the causeway was built, and now it's probably about 2 feet tall. But you can surf on it, which is kind of neat.
Nice. For like the 2 months of the year that you're able to surf.
Yeah. Well, people like, I don't know, if you go up into Tofino and stuff like that, people go into December if you want to. Yeah, it's
holy crap.
There's definitely a unique ecosystem. It doesn't, like Tofino's in BC on the other side.
Yeah.
But Yeah, just the heat from the ocean, I guess, keeps things a little bit warmer.
Yeah. So and just to make sure I got the pronunciation, it is the Petitcodiac.
Petitcodiac, yeah.
Petitcodiac.
Yeah.
Nice. Yep. So that's the river up there, and I'm just looking at my map and seeing like I'm curious, just landscape or geography wise, how close to Maine is that point where it goes off into the bay? Is it like way far away, or is it closer than I think?
It would probably be about 2.5 hours drive if you drove the coastal route from where I am to Maine. It'd probably be 2-3 hours. So it's pretty close, I guess.
Couple 2-3 hours.
Yeah.
Yeah. Nice. Again, I'm getting my geography lessons today.
It's a pretty small province. Like, you can drive across the province in a couple of hours.
That's kind of like an ideal size, like, state or province for me, because you can explore the entirety of it and almost like never exhaust it, but at the same time, it's still like a pretty specific and pretty tight-knit selection of land, if that makes sense. And I think that helps maintain what you talked about before of like returning to a place and exhausting it, and there's always going to be other places to go to. Yeah,
for sure.
So what I really like about this work is kind of what I talked about briefly before, is that, you know, that there's that dynamic between the landscapes and environmental portraits, and they fit really well together. And of course, for the past 20 years or so, that's been a pretty good structure that a lot of artists working in this kind of post-documentary style have been really doing. I mean, it kind of goes all the way back to Paul Graham's A1 as one of those early examples of a color large format body of work about that structure. And then, of course, the most recent obvious example of Alex Soth, Sleeping by the Mississippi. It's almost like you can't not reference either of those books when looking at this style of project. So when you were working through this, since this was one of your more recently finished works, what was your process of editing the work, selecting the images from however many that you wound up shooting for the project? What was that like for that process?
It was kind of just intuition for the most part. I don't really take a lot of pictures, if I'm completely honest. I'm pretty selective. And I guess it comes from like the expense of film, not just like through the cost, but like time, scanning, doing all that. But I don't know. I'm pretty selective when it comes to actual shooting. For sequencing, I wish that I could put it to words. I find, I don't know, it's a pretty common complaint of photographers to say, you know, I can't really put what I want to words properly. I can't even do it now. But like the sequencing process is it's just intuitive. What I'll do is just take a whole bunch of I guess I'll start in Lightroom and create a big collection of images, and anything that is worth printing, I'll print little work print, 5-inch print, and just lay them out on a big table that I have in my studio here. And they kind of just they fit together. Like you I don't know, you stare at them long enough on the table or on a wall, and they'll move themselves around into the right order. And I don't know, I try to avoid patterns. Sometimes they just kind of appear, though. But it's mostly just intuition and just staring at something for so long that it just flows together. Yeah. I think that seems to be a really, I guess I could say common. I mean, when it comes to photographers editing their own work too, is like, I can't remember which photographer it was, but one of them said that I'm like verbatim or very close to verbatim said, I'm a terrible editor of my own work. And, yeah.
You know, he would always have, the book publisher do all that. And, I think there's something nice about, like, the process that you described of just kind of choosing which ones have really stuck with you and that feel like they're worth printing, laying them all out. When I was working on my MFA thesis, I wound up printing off almost every single photo that I shot between starting grad school and this past January. was the last month that I shot photos for my MFA work. And I had this stack, like 2 inches tall, of almost 400 photographs that I was, and a lot of them were duplicates of the same scene, just like slight variations and such. And, moving those around on the floor because I had them like 8 inches by 6.5 inches. And it was a really nice process. I think that it sounds like you use pretty much the same kind of mentality with going through that. Is there any possibility of this work being put into a book format, or is this something you're thinking more of like exhibitions only kind of thing?
I would love to publish it as a book. I submitted it when it was finished. I think I called it kind of done in the last couple months of 2021. I submitted it all over the place and didn't really get a lot of traction. It got there's a couple. I'm just going to grab them on the shelf. There's an image in Sola Journal's first issue, The Land from Which We Come, and it was just like one-offs. Oh, sorry, it wasn't a zine. It was Analog Forever's. It was an online show. I'll have to look it up. But they were just like one-offs, and it was awesome to be recognized in these projects, but there wasn't any context to the project. There were more...
They were just kind of images and a general idea at the time, and they started to kind of form a little bit later.
Oh, it's cool to like open up a book and you see your work in there, especially like alongside other great work. It's a good feeling.
I was just at a talk at Rhode Island School of Design this past Tuesday, and I was catching up with one of my teachers from my master's program who was also attending it. And one of the things that he brought up is like, I almost feel like there are too many photo books being published right now. And he's all in on photo books. He has his own library for it and everything. But he was saying that, like to some extent, I almost feel like that's true, because it's like there are so many books that we all kind of like collectively want to get the same books over and over again. It's like it almost seems overwhelming, like the quantity of photo books that have been coming out the past 5 years alone.
So yeah, I'd agree somewhat. I don't know if I'd say that there's too many.
Oh yeah.
Just choose not to buy them. But
yeah, exactly.
One thing that I would say about photo books is for Canadians, I wish they were more accessible. It's so hard. Maybe it's just because I'm here in New Brunswick, but it's so hard to get a lot of the photo books that you see blown up on social media. The shipping alone is insane. I just bought River's Dream by Kern Hadelberg.
Oh yeah.
And it ended up costing me like $200. I wanted it so bad.
Yeah.
It's the second printing. I slept on the first one, and I wanted it so bad that I was just, screw it. $200.
That's just something that's always been so like baffling to me, for like international shipping between countries that border each other. And it's like, I know there's always like, there's the customs and all that, of course, but it's just like crazy to me, because it's something that I feel like a lot of us Americans that like see all this work online, we think that it's accessible, but then you bring that up and it's like, it really, it's accessible for people in the country where it's being published and printed, and that's it.
Yeah, that was like Eggleston's big thing with photo books being, this democratic process, but it is if you're somewhat well off in a Western country.
Like I just I ordered Nathan Pierce's book that's being published with Deadbeat Club, and like even that, like 50 some ish dollars, close to $60 for the book and then shipping, like that alone is already like, oh god, like that's $50-$60 that is going to be something on my shelf that I'm going to be really excited to have. But at the same time, it's like even that much for a lot of artists that are like kind of early on in their artistic lives, or making those steps to bring their name a little bit more out there. It's still that much more challenging to just like build up that what I would consider research material. tax write-off, if you would say. So.
Yeah.
So kind of moving into the work that you've been sharing a lot lately on your social media, like we got a lot of black and white work, and looking at your website, there's the gallery that you have, or project, or whatever you would call, that you titled Peripheries, and it's all these black and white images, and it's quite a bit different in like spirit of the work to that of Friday Nights. The obvious thing that it's black and white, but also there's no people in the photos on your website here for it. They're really gentle, but have a certain kind of tension to them that I think is that has that main like spirit difference, project spirit difference from Friday Nights to this. There's that aspect to it. So tell me a little bit about that collection of work there, Peripheries.
Yeah. So this work. I will say first, though, Peripheries is, I don't know if I'd say that's still the name.
Yeah.
That's on me. Obviously, it's my website. I should go in there and update that. But yeah, it's quite a bit different. It's entirely personal work. That's why you don't really see any people in there. It's kind of hard to tie in the project to other people. I'm sure like other people would kind of like relate to it or whatever, but it's, I don't know, it just doesn't feel right to have portraits of other people in it. Yeah, it's all black and white. That was I wrestled with that for a long time. Color started to get, it was really strange. Color started to get to be overwhelming, I guess to put it. It was almost like you get a scan back or whatever, and everything would look great, but there's like just something outside of the main focus of the image that was a brighter or a darker color, and it would be distracting, and for me it would ruin the image. I think it was just like overthinking, but I settled into this black and white workflow. I for a while there's a lot of color work that was mixed in, but it didn't make any sense. Didn't really flow, so it just kind of stuck to this black and white, which is, I don't know, I 2, 3, 4 years ago I wouldn't have considered myself to be a black and white. I still don't consider myself to be a black and white photographer, or a color photographer for that matter, but I didn't really plan on making a black and white body of work. It's kind of foreign to me, but it's been, I don't know, I've been liking that process.
Yeah, I think, that's something that I've observed, and this is strictly through social media as well as what has been published a lot the past couple of years alone. It seems like, I almost feel like everyone's on the same page with color. If you've noticed the same thing, like it seems like every single artist out there is making black and white now, but either used to do color, or those black and white artists that have been working in black and white for so long are starting to get more recognition now, because suddenly like everybody's doing black and white again, which I'm very okay with, because I'm in the same pool. I finished my master's work, which was all in color, and then I just kind of had this gut feeling of I'm sick and tired of color. I'm sick and tired of color correcting and making sure the blue isn't too cyan or whatever, and like it's too much.
Yeah,
so,
for sure.
But I really like your point about why you didn't include people in these photographs, no portraits, because it's a personal work, and I think that really helps give it a kind of first-person perspective. And I think that's something that a lot of people that may be not necessarily turned off, but just not as interested in work that doesn't have portraits will say that, it's like hard to connect with bodies of work that don't have portraits in them. But, I think that you and I can probably agree that it's honestly probably stronger to connect with the work that doesn't have portraits, but has the kind of tension that you have here in this soon to be renamed work. I think that the way that you have, like the images that you have a really interesting kind of point of view to them. And it reminds me of something that I think about a lot in my own research and practice, is the the peripheral view of traveling. Hence, you know, the name of the project of currently kind of makes me think of that too. That, you know, in whatever vehicle we're traveling in, or if we're just walking, you know, passing moments are like a really important thing, I think, in these. So do you think that those passing moments, those passing spaces were something that fueled this work, that played a significant role in this work, or is this something that was more not so much in your head when working on it?
Yeah, it was a part of it in a way. The title is kind of that in a sense. Like there are these peripheral areas outside town, really, like rural roads, or just wandering through the forest, whatever. So yeah, it ties into it a certain amount. It just kind of makes up the overall premise, and just I guess the areas. I don't know if that makes any sense.
No, I think it does. Yeah. Yeah, it makes me think of Ed Pinar's practice of just going for walks and taking photographs of whatever catches his eye. But I think that, you know, like his practice has, like, the way that he works, I think, is a way that a lot of artists today have been going about their personal work, is literally just going for walks, going for drives around their local area, and just kind of collecting in a mass of photographs, however many. I think you and I probably share a sentiment that, like, I also don't take a whole lot of pictures. I take photos maybe once a week if I'm lucky. And when I do take photographs, it's the equivalent of, since I do digital now, it's like the equivalent of 2 6x7 rolls. I'm shooting like roughly 20 actual pictures. Yeah. If I even get lucky for that. But I think that really, like, the way that you've been working through this, I think that is really like what makes it such a strong, tense body of work. And it makes me wonder about, like, for the process in not just this developing body of work, but also overall, how much planning and scouting goes into your work? Are you specifically, like, looking out for a location, not necessarily a specific subject, but like, you're gonna go to this specific area and plan out that kind of thing? Because I know you mentioned that it's like you often don't take pictures of what you're listing out, but is there an amount of, like, visual sculpting that goes into when you do come across something that you do plan on photographing?
Sometimes. For the most part, the project was just kind of like wandering around and stumbling upon things, you know, finding things that, you know, just kind of stuck out and I wanted to see a little bit more closely, that sort of thing. But then in that process of just kind of wandering around, I would find, like, for example, just last week I went back to this stretch of road and I'm gonna have to go back because I didn't like the results, but I go back to a stretch of road or whatever it is to either try an idea or, you know, wait for the light to change. Sometimes that matters and sometimes it doesn't, and it's there isn't really like a framework or a structure to it. It's just, I don't know, sometimes it works, and then sometimes I'll go back to look at something or photograph it again, and it just, I don't know, it doesn't work, which is almost like it's disappointing, you know, in the moment, but it's kind of still beneficial to like engage with that process anyway. I don't know, just to keep pushing through it. But yeah, it's I don't know, I'm kind of wishy-washy with that. Like, I don't, sometimes I'll spend like an entire day just inside in my studio dropping a knife in front of the camera to get that perfectly timed thing. And then other times I'll just put my boots on and go for a drive with, like, you know, radio off and no real destination.
Yeah, you kind of answered the question I had too with about the knife photos specifically, because you know, that was kind of the one that made me think about, like, how much structure is there in the process. And I think that, you know, you mentioned, like, there's an amount of that, there's like a percentage of planning that goes into it, and I think that helps with building the the visual tension throughout the work. And it just also reminded me of something that one of my professors in undergrad really drilled home for us. The act of reshooting. Like he really made sure that all of us were reshooting an idea. And that whenever we went to go reshoot something, 9 times out of 10, it came out better. If it didn't come out better, it was a strong lesson for us to learn why that specific idea didn't work. Yeah. And I think that's a really, really healthy practice that I'm guilty of. To send a formal apology to Bill and say I haven't been doing it, but I have been thinking about it. There is that amount of revisiting certain things too. Like I look back at old work a lot, and I say old work with a huge asterisk next to it because it's not that old. And kind of like seeing those photos that I used to think were not very strong, and then now years later I think, oh, this is actually a really strong picture that I thought was trash in 2018 or 2019.
Yeah, they can almost, when you go back to old work, it can also take on a new meaning. It kind of feels corny to say, but
it's
you just like reconnect with your own work in a new way. I find that I do that all the time. And that's, I don't know, I kind of struggle with that in a sense, like with what I should be sharing and what I shouldn't. I feel like we should wait until the project's finished and not share any of the work until the whole idea comes to its end. But it's hard to, I don't know, it's almost part of the process to share it as it goes, as it evolves.
I think that's one of the things that I see a lot of folks struggle with the exact same thing a lot. And I think that like these days with how social media has kind of evolved and taken over all of our lives, that I think more people are starting to realize, at least in the art community, that Instagram is not our portfolio, and it is just a place to just share stuff, share the process to some extent, because I think that there's an amount of that, and then at the same time I feel like your point of like not sharing something until it's finished is also totally valid too. And I think with like it kind of goes from like an idea to idea basis. Like certain work really probably should be like kept close to your chest for a little while. Other work that's really just kind of like exploration and kind of seeing what happens. Sharing that process in the world, I think, works for that kind of work. So I think it really kind of depends on what the work really is to determine whether or not you should share it with the world or only share it with like your close, tight-knit group of people that roast you every single time you show them a picture.
Yeah, for sure.
Exactly. So with this work, with your work in general, I'm really interested in how much of a role place plays in your work, that you're working in New Brunswick, and how much of a role does specifically focusing on your local area work, and versus is there part of you that also wants to travel to make projects as well?
Yeah, I think yes to both. Place, it's kind of hard to, I guess, explain properly, but I feel like place does matter a lot in the work. But when you look at it, like you say, with Friday nights, that some of the images could be in Texas or Wyoming, wherever. So the place, I guess, wouldn't be important visually, but for the context of the work or the idea behind the work, I think place, it has to be a role. At least for me, in my work, it has to be a role in some way, and just kind of tying into what I was saying earlier about how I find like the history of a certain area to be interesting in whatever way. I think that kind of drives the importance of place as well. I don't know. Yeah, I think that makes sense to me.
Yeah.
And for working in other places, I would love to. It just comes down to like time and money, really.
Exactly. Yeah.
I have a few, like I'd love to do like the road trip projects. That's something that you don't see in Canada. Canadian photographers don't do like the American road trip. There's no Canadian road trips, and I would love to do like a coast to coast, even though that would take forever. Coast to coast would be cool, but even just like, I'm not originally from New Brunswick. I was born in northern Ontario. So when I was younger, we would travel in the summer. We'd go from Ontario to here, where my dad's family was, and those road trips were when I was a kid pretty boring. But I'd be really interested to revisit that route. Or the routes that we used to take. That would be a really fun project to do.
That's something that I think that work like that really is really important to like help keep building that visual culture of North America. Kind of going back to before, like that. There don't seem to be as many that either you and I can't think of any specific artists that are Canadian making work about Canada in a broad stroke sense of things. And I think that kind of work is something that would help get more familiar with that visual story. I think, like you've kind of brought up before about like how the places have like those histories and everything like that. And, that at that same presentation that I was at on Tuesday this week, it was Irina Rozovsky that was presenting, and she really like drove home that the phrase "geography has a memory," and I think that phrase alone is like really, really important for photographers, especially to think about when we're out working. I wrote a research paper a while ago on that place is an integral aspect to photography. For all the exact reasons that you've talked about, and that even if it's not like visually important, it's still there for the context and still important. I was even thinking about how like making work in a studio, that place of the studio itself is an important geography, I guess you could say, for the work. And I think that really kind of leads me to the third body of work that you have on your website, the Stories of Rocks That Burned. And I think that, just the title alone makes me think of wildfires, even if that's not necessarily what it's about, but it makes me think about that. So tell me about what the project actually is and kind of how it came about.
So this is kind of a failed project.
We love
if I'm honest. It probably shouldn't be on my website because it's like, 12 pictures of this random place, but Stories of Rocks That Burned. It is a really, really interesting story. There's a type of shale here it's only found here in the county that I live in. It's called albertite, and it's very similar to coal. It looks like coal, smells like coal, but it burns super, super hot. So like if you had a coal stove in your home 200 years ago, and you put this albertite in it thinking it was coal, it would like melt the bottom of the stove out, like your cast iron stove. That's how much hotter it burned. It was discovered in the mid 1800s, and it led to the invention of kerosene and kind of replaced whale oil in street lamps throughout New England.
That's my homeland currently, New Bedford's whaling history. We provided the world with that oil.
Yeah, so there's a rich history between shipbuilding in the area and I guess I wouldn't say that this history is rich, but nobody really seems to know about it. And when you tell people, it's just like, oh my God, that's fascinating. That's how kerosene was invented. And then like, that's where it ends. Like, it's not for some reason that story doesn't get any traction. So anyway, this project was kind of based around that 200-year-old mine that's no longer operating. Nobody knows what albertite is. So I just kind of wanted to document the community as it is today, and it's just kind of like a side road. But the first time that I drove through there, I had no idea about the history of the area. It just had this. I just had this feeling, like a gut feeling that I needed to come back here and I needed to document it. And so I tried that, and I was pretty happy with a lot of the landscape stuff. And I wanted to, because it was a project about the community, I wanted to make some portraits of people and do some still lives of homes and stuff, but nobody was really interested. I got one person to say yes to a portrait, and it's just to be clear, it's 100% probably how I approached people, and not like I don't resent these people for saying no. Is what I'm trying to say. They weren't interested. Most of them didn't even really. The big question was always like, why me? Like, you're doing this project about the old mines. Like, what does that have to do with me? And I was just really not good at explaining, because you live in this community, basically. And then I think that's interesting. But it was never really, nobody was really interested in it, I guess.
Yeah. And, sometimes that happens too. Like, that was kind of something that I ran into when I was originally working on a Route 66 project specifically in Illinois, not like the whole stretch, because everyone knows about the Southwest stretch, because that's one everyone's interested in. I ran into that same predicament where I have all these landscapes and I wanted more portraits. I wound up only getting grand total 4 portraits while out on Route 66 over the span of the almost 3 years that I was working on those photos. And it kind of had a similar situation where it wound up kind of not really becoming a dead project, but kind of got dissolved. And it's something that I wouldn't mind returning to. But I think, like the way the story behind this location that this semi-defunct, I guess you could say, project is, I think that alone is like super interesting. And I think, of course, I'm a little biased in that, New Bedford, I guess you could say, is like your competitor. And with our both of our mutual former light source, heat source situation, I think that could be a really interesting thing to explore. And if you were to revisit this idea about maybe expanding it to something about like source of heat, source of light kind of thing, and looking at historical sources of those things, that what led to the invention of kerosene and things like that, and how photographing, say, come down to the south coast of New England and photograph things that relate to the pseudo coal. I already forgot the name of it. It starts with an A.
Albertite, yeah.
Albertite. Kind of seeing what those parallels are in other landscapes that have similar things. I think that could be an interesting way to try expanding on the idea. But of course, it's your project. It's up to you. You do what you want.
No, that's a great point, because I did at one point when I was still actively working on it, I was trying to figure out how I could get down to even just Boston to photograph some of the areas where there would have been those old oil lamps that the kerosene would have eventually taken over. It's just that connection to where the heating source came to would be a really interesting aspect. And then the shipping industry as well would tie in really nicely, because on its own the shipbuilding industry here wasn't it was definitely a part of the early colonial times, but it's not like what the area is known for now, if you know what I mean. It's a kind of faded history, but it was significant then. But that would be an interesting addition for sure. Should write a couple grant applications for that.
Yeah, exactly. And it's of course, again, my bias of where I currently live comes in, where actually the street that I currently live on is one of the historic neighborhood stretch things. New Bedford has done a really great job protecting the historic areas that have or would have had those gas lamps that were previously fueled by whale oil. And it's one of the only towns in the south coast of New England that if you go to the downtown area, there are zero power lines above head.
Oh, that's
They're
cool.
all underground because all those lamps are now electric. But it's like one of those things, like if you're to find the right pocket of the downtown area of New Bedford, you would, with the exceptions of like cars and things like that, it would look like you're looking at, the 1600s into the 1800s. Forget the last whaling ship left New Bedford, I think in the early 1900s, before they kind of axed whale oil as a source of light.
Right.
But like those come down to New Bedford, we got some potential landscapes out here for you for that idea. It'd be very urban, so I think it would be an interesting the urban kind of setting versus these landscapes. I think would be
The contrast between the two.
Yeah, the contrast. But yeah, I think that of course, going with this idea, I think would be really really cool to see. Sometimes these kind of projects take even a decade to make. From what I've seen other artists do similar ideas, so. There ain't no shame in putting on the back burner for a long time,
I mean, it's on my website for a reason, right? Like, I'm not entirely ready to say like this is a failed project, but as it is right now, it's. I'd love to return to it. It's just like every time I think about calling somebody up and like, hey, can you get me in touch with this person? And that whole like. For some reason, it was always like, oh, call so and so, and then you call that person, call so and so, and it's just a wild goose chase to track down people for information.
There is the New Bedford Whaling Museum that I got to see the kind of the underbelly of. I got to kind of go through all the archives of all the artifacts and everything. I got to smell some of the sperm whale oil, and it's bizarre. It's like. It's really strange, but I've reached out to one of my friends that works there, trying to see if I could photograph some of the artifacts, just out of curiosity. Like, they've got a little studio kind of thing. They have like professionals that handle the artifacts, and I've been interested in making essentially still life photos of just kind of random objects, essentially, and that kind of thing. And I feel like a resource like that would be really cool to see how that could contribute to this idea sometime in the future. To move things along, since I've talked to a lot of rural photographers that they're so isolated from New York, Chicago, LA, what is your experience like being like when your perspective, I guess you could say, about being an artist making work like this, based on where you're at?
I guess I don't know. Sometimes I struggle with like just calling myself an artist. I think everybody like goes through that, but like it's like not something that I do full time. I would love to have like more time to dedicate to it, but it's kind of like I don't know, isolating, but that seems like a really melancholic way to put it. It's like I'm not as much a part of the art community here as I would like to be, and it's just because of like my schedule, I guess. Just can't line up with everybody, which kind of sucks. So I don't know. It kind of feels like just plugging away by myself. There's a community here that you can link up with that I get to see periodically, but yeah, for the most part, it's just kind of like a solitary path. I don't know. I feel like it's just coming across as like I'm so lonely, and it's not my intention at all. But yeah, I just kind of like do my own thing, I guess. It'd be nice to have more time available to meet up with other people, to I don't know, just talk like this, to be honest.
Yeah, honestly. That's something that I feel like pretty much everyone that I've asked in that kind of geographic situation has essentially the same answer. So it's totally like that's kind of where I was at in Illinois before I came out here. But even now that I'm out here, like my own like work schedule versus ability to make art and also social life and everything, personal life, it's interesting trying to balance it.
Yeah.
So it's like my once a week ability to shoot photos, but it's like there are some weeks where I have to like take time off and I don't have not only like the money to like submit to things that cost money, like solo shows, submissions, stuff like that. Like I would love to show some work at a small gallery, but it costs $50 to submit to it.
Yeah.
And it would, I had to drive up to Boston or over to New York or whatever if I get lucky. And, so like I feel like that's one of those like unfortunate, but not really terrible things. Like, the smaller town areas, more rural areas, it's harder for artists of any kind that trying to get their work shown locally is almost as challenging as it is to get it shown in a big city. And it's kind of funny to me how it works out that way. It's challenging no matter what, but we push through anyway, don't we?
Yeah, it is. Like that's an interesting thing to come across. I find the same thing. Like I've had more luck showing my work here than anywhere else, but like it's definitely kind of like the same kind of experience where you can't just walk into a gallery with a print and be like, I want to put this up. It's never going to be that way. It's
like the last show that I had anything in was in South Dakota. It was one piece. A friend of mine was putting it on, and that's the other thing is like shipping the work to wherever, even if it's like a relatively small piece. Like if it has some weight to it, like it's going to cost a little bit to send it, and then brings up the same predicament about books as earlier. Is like if you have a show, if you get accepted to a show in New York, but you're up in New Brunswick, it's that much more expensive to send a piece to New York because you have to go through all those extra steps.
Yeah, and you like all that, and you have to hope that it gets there undamaged.
Yeah.
Right? Like that's what's terrifying for me. Like back in the before I switched to digital, having film, there's a lab here that does color but not black and white, so everything black and white I had to send out, and every time putting that in the mail is like, am I gonna see this again?
yeah, exactly. I have the opposite situation here. I have a local lab that only does black and white film and no color film, so
okay.
it's kind of bizarre, but they also do like large format printing and stuff like that, so they're probably going to be my people to get prints made for future ideas and all that. But anyway,
we don't really have I wish that there was a little bit more of that side of things. Like there's the camera store here. They do color film. So to get that, I have to go to New York or Halifax.
Yeah,
which kind of sucks. So I don't know. I've been trying to figure out how to get a large format printer into my basement to make. It's I don't know. I'll figure it out.
It's a long-term project.
Yeah.
So I guess to kind of get things close to a close here, is there anything that is coming up that you would like to share? Any exhibitions, things you're featured in, anything like that you may have coming up that you would like to share?
Well, I mentioned earlier the website needs a definite update. So hopefully by the time this is available, I'll have that on top, that taken care of. Aside from that, no, I don't really have anything going on. I haven't submitted any work for a long time, and I've been sharing work from this more recent body of work. But I haven't submitted it anywhere, and I don't think that I will until it's finished. I've made one book dummy for it, and have since added more work, so there'll be a second dummy soon. But yeah, there's not a lot else going on.
Is this work that you're talking about, the current book dummy situation, is that the same or different from the currently called Peripheries project?
So the book dummy it's all the work and a little bit more that you'd see on the website, and so I guess what I would do is just make add the new work to it, and then see if I'm going to commit to changing the name. I don't have a better name for it. I'm just not 100% sold on Peripheries anymore.
Well, to kind of close things out, where can people find you and your work online?
Website is levigarfield.com, and I'm mostly just on Instagram, really, at levi.garfield, at levi.garfield.
And is your Twitter defunct now that the world hates Twitter?
Yeah, I haven't used Twitter in the longest time. I was kind of excited about Threads for a little while, but I don't know. Do people still use it?
Apparently they do. I keep getting notifications about things like that. So I'm like, you know what? I guess people are using it.
Yeah, I get the notifications, and then you post something, and it just gets nothing.
It's growing pains. It's a newish app.
Yeah.
But anyway, so yeah, folks, everyone, definitely go check out Levi's work and drop him a follow on Instagram. You know the works, the usual things. So Levi, thank you so much for coming on and having this conversation with me. It's been a really, really great time.
Oh, thanks for inviting me. It was fun. Good chat.
Yeah, absolutely, dude. Well, everyone, thank you all for listening, and I will see you in the next one.